Yeah, from Baton Rouge to Norman, Columbus to Clemson, they are celebrating. The hard work is over, and now the really hard work begins. Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, LSU, Oklahoma, PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State, and Clemson. The Final Four have been revealed. As we welcome you to Championship Drive Rankings Reaction presented by Capital One alongside Jonathan Dilma, Dan Orlovsky, Greg McElroy. I'm Kevin Connors. How about 18 national championships between the four programs left standing here in the college football playoff? JV, what's your initial reaction to the committee's initial submission?
I'm glad they made a decision because we sure couldn't all morning long. And they got it right. LSU number one. I can't knock them for it. Ohio State had been tremendous all year long, but LSU 1, OSU 2, Clemson most dangerous at 3, and then Oklahoma, congrats on getting in.
Yeah, I think that LSU being 1 is warranted. You know, going into that game yesterday, I thought no chance that LSU jumps Ohio State. Because to be number 1, you have to go take it from someone. And what I saw the difference between Ohio State and LSU was I credit Ohio State, right? I mean, the character and the resolve of a champion showed up. But the dominance of a champion showed up for LSU. And that's why LSU, it's not should they be number 1. You got to prove to me that they shouldn't be number 1. And so I'm okay with them being 1.
Yeah, essentially what the committee was tasked with was picking your favorite child amongst 3. Because all 3 were the candidates. Even Clemson, with their lack of strength of schedule, they've been as dominant as anybody in college football. The reality is they cited the concerns they had for LSU's defense. Those concerns these last couple of weeks were addressed. And then when you look at the resume, LSU's resume has been pretty remarkable with the offense and now their defense coming to their own. So I have no issue with LSU at 1, but Ohio State and Clemson, they're in the Fiesta Bowl. It's going to be a matchup.
Yeah. I know this. We've got 4 unbelievable offenses that we're going to see in the semifinal games. The potential for Oklahoma, who knows, to play spoiler. I don't know if it would be Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson, but they'll be heavy underdogs going into
the game. It would be on that level.
It might be on that level.
On that level.
Yeah. Come on. I know you are not on the Oklahoma can contend train. No. I think we need to put a little bit more respect to Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch. And there's 3 weeks to prepare for that football game. 2 really good coaches.
All right, who you got, LSU or Oklahoma?
I'm taking LSU.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to do it. I thank you. Beat me to it.
Well, that doesn't mean that I don't think that OU can't be formidable, that they can't make it a football game.
They will. They made it a football game last year, but we knew they were going to lose. So you just want a fun game. It'll be a fun game, guys.
Fun. Everyone's going to try their hardest. I'm really looking forward to it.
Wasn't a lot of deliberating there. Dan got to his decision really quickly. Well, we got 3 hours to break it all down. Reese and the guys have been doing it all afternoon. Why don't we send it over to them for their thoughts in just a bit. But we begin by taking a look at the matchups. Ohio State and Clemson in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. Tantalizing matchup. Number 2 versus number 3. Combined 26-0. Buckeyes 633 points, Tigers 605 points. Ohio State 5 wins against top 25 teams. Clemson just 2 wins against ranked teams. We will delve into whether or not that should be held against them. Of course, we've seen this matchup before. 2016 Fiesta Bowl, complete domination by Deshaun Watson and the Tigers, 31-0. Watson threw for a touchdown, ran for 2. Wayne Gallman had a tug. Kendall Joseph, Ben Boulware in that D, pitched the shutout of J.T. Barrett, handing the Buckeyes perhaps the worst loss of the Urban Meyer era. Perhaps. It was domination back in 2016. Will that be the case this time around? You know, this could have been the national title game, and I think that we would all have been okay with that. JV, your initial reaction to these 2 heavyweights colliding?
Well, one, what we just saw, that 31-0 domination, completely different team. If you remember that year, we were talking about the ups and downs that Ohio State had. I didn't see ups and downs all season long from Ryan Day and this Ohio State team. I've seen them, frankly, ascend the whole time and then hit a little bit of a lull defensively, in particular, against these last 3 matchups. So when I look at the matchup now with Clemson and Ohio State, man, when I say they, literally both sides match up really well against each other. And the biggest thing is that the corners for Clemson, they have the speed. They have the speed, and because they have the speed to keep up with any wide receiver Ohio State puts out there, you can run whatever you want, Brett Venables. You can blitz, you can disguise, you can do whatever you want, and that's going to be a challenge for Justin Fields and Ohio State offense.
Yeah, I think coming off yesterday's game with Justin Fields against Wisconsin, right? Like you saw a little bit of struggle by him of just, you know, seeing some different defenses, seeing some different kinds of pressures and coverages. Well, he hasn't seen anything like what Venables will do with Clemson. Everything that Clemson lost in their D-line last year went to the back 7. And I kind of say, like, their defense will look like Star Wars at time. Like, as a quarterback, you'll stand there and be like, Greg, like, okay, pressure's coming from here. I have to throw the ball into pressure there, but there's 4 other people standing there waiting for me to throw the football. And so they will look at that tape from yesterday and go, okay, I like doing this kind of pressure package against Justin Fields, as good as he's been this year. And then the flip side is Ohio State's defense against the Clemson offense. It is who are you going to commit to stop? Yeah. Like, even if you commit to stop Travis Etienne, he is the best back in the country on contact. Like, he never goes down on first hit. And so then the challenge is, well, if you commit to that, well, Trevor Lawrence and Higgins and everybody, they can and Trevor Lawrence is playing as good as Joe Burrow. Like, no one's talking about that. Trevor Lawrence is playing as good as any quarterback in America right now and can make more don't do those types of throws in really keyhole type windows. More than any quarterback in the playoff.
Yeah, I think what's amazing, too, is Chase Young. We're obviously spent a lot of time about Chase Young and working against that Clemson offensive line. If there's one area that I look at and I say maybe that's not the most elite unit, it's probably the Clemson offensive line in this matchup. Everyone else is just so incredibly sound. But now Trevor Lawrence, not only has he been accurate throwing the football, he's disruptive with his legs. And he's been a better runner this year than he was at any point last season. If you look back at Clemson over the years, when Deshaun Watson was a quarterback, they've ramped up those quarterback runs in a postseason setting. So I would expect the same from Clemson to try to neutralize Chase Young and that rush that we're going to see from Ohio State's defense.
I mean, how many NFL players are going to be on that field when they play that game? How many first-round
out of the 44?
Probably like 22 when every time. 11 and 11.
Football, right? Yeah. And we're just beginning to dig in right now. Reese and the guys with much more on the matchups and if the committee, in fact, did get it right.
Ohio State might be able to get a little closure in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. Last time they were in the playoff, Clemson destroyed them, 31-0. Now you have the two teams that are top 2 in defensive efficiency, evenly matched game. What does this game turn on, Joey?
Ohio State being behind in the Big Ten championship game was the first time they faced adversity all season long. I believe that makes them a better football team for what they came out and did in the second half. They're going to roll into this game with a little bit of attitude that they're not the number 1 team in the country. They're going out here to face Clemson, a team that last time we were there didn't go so well. So I think the attitude of the team, the focus of the team is going to be different now, and I think they win this game.
I think Ohio State has to run the football, and the identity they've had all season offensively has been J.K. Dobbins running the ball against the best defenses they've seen. He's been physical. He's worn defenses down. But I think Justin Fields being healthy, had the MCL injury late, he'll be healthy in this game, and those zone reads and the scrambles, I think, helps this offense out on the ground. Now, Clemson defensively doesn't have the same first-round NFL talent they had a year ago, but they do fit the run extremely well with linebackers and safeties. They're giving up about 10 points a game. So Ohio State's ability running the ball, I think, goes a long way in determining if they can win this game.
Well, and I think Ohio State, you talk about getting to the quarterback and you talk about covering, because Trevor Lawrence obviously is going to be a big key to this game with his weapons. They can do it. Chase Young can do it. A multitude of other guys can do it. Okudah, Wade, Arnett in the back end. They've got guys that can make it hard. I think which running back can get down? Like, can Etienne, who's not talked about obviously enough, can Etienne get down? Can J.T. Dobbins get down? Which running back has the best day that helps their quarterback with some balance and helps us in that department so they can make some big plays?
We haven't mentioned Trevor Lawrence. How about that?
Oh, he'll be there, and he'll be good right there. Ohio State and Clemson, what a great showdown on December 28th.
In the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, mighty number 1 LSU against the champions of the Big 12, Oklahoma. The Tigers' resume reads like Warren Buffett's portfolio. 4 wins against the committee's top 12 teams, 40 points or more at least 10 times this season. Oklahoma, the 7-0 start, but then the hiccup at Kansas State. Narrow wins following that. Ultimately, the Big 12 championship game victory over the Baylor Bears. Dan, you kind of walked down that road first. Let's have you talk about here just a bit. I'm not as concerned about Jalen Hurts and the offense scoring points. I know they've played better, but the defense, can they stop LSU enough to stay in the game?
Yes. Now, it's going to have to do a lot to do. All right, so I had that Oklahoma-Kansas State matchup, right? And Oklahoma loves to do a bunch of pre-snap movement. Now, if Oklahoma wins, like even before like the game plan of it, if they get a beat on some of the stuff that LSU can do and they win their pre-snap movement, it's huge because then their secondary plays a lot better. Their secondary is so dependent on the pre-snap movement or the post-snap movement, them creating some kind of pressure and forcing the quarterback to get the ball out. So if Alex Grinch can get a beat on that Joe Brady offense and some tendency, That's going to be a huge deal because it's not going to ask those corners, those safeties to have to cover an extended period of time. When Oklahoma's playing good defense, it's because they are doing that and they're penetrating, they're getting downhill, and they're playing super aggressive football. Now, obviously easier said than done, but that is the formula to go do it. I'm more concerned about the offense for Oklahoma
Really?
than
I'm with you.
I think Oklahoma's offense has become one-dimensional. I really do. Like, I think it's become so much Jalen Hurts' run game, and the pass game, CeeDee Lamb's been great, but other than that, and even that has been a struggle at times. So I'm a little bit more concerned with them scoring enough points.
I'm with you. I look at Oklahoma, and this is probably the first time in my lifetime I've looked at the defense and said, okay, that group's playing pretty well. Yeah. I like what they're doing in a lot of ways. And I look at the offense, and I'm a little bit hesitant to feel great about how they match up because this game very well could be won by a team that's going to score 60. It's just the reality. LSU is going to get their yards. They're going to get their points. Can Oklahoma get off the field? Probably not between the 20s, but in the red zone, they might have a chance. That's the biggest thing. They have to hold them to field goals, not touchdowns. So I'm really worried about Jalen Hurts right now. I know the stats are eye-popping, the numbers are glaring, and he has had a remarkable season in regards to productivity. But if you really look and dive a little deeper into it, he's missed open receivers, and really in the last few games, the final month of the season, he's been loose with the football. We've seen turnovers, we've seen bad decisions, we've seen poor reads, and those things have almost cost him on several different occasions. So he needs to play not just his best game in an Oklahoma uniform, it has to be his best game in his college career in order to keep Oklahoma in this game.
I hear everything you're saying. I go back to why it won't be a formidable game because the weakness is the strength for LSU. The weakness of Oklahoma is what? The secondary.
Okay.
The strength for LSU is what? The receivers.
Right.
So even if Alex Grinch were to give you a nice scheme, confuse the offensive line a little bit, it's jump balls. They can't play it. You're talking about Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. These guys are Sunday players. They're going against average, maybe above average corners, safeties. It's not happening for Oklahoma's defense. So the only thing you can do, the way I look at it, is blitz and continue to blitz. Because if you get home, that's a win for you. High risk, high reward, right? They go over the top, at least you give Jalen Hurts another shot to throw the ball. Now, it's easier to scheme offensively for a defense than the other way around. So I can see Lincoln Riley saying, hey, look, we can get some yards here. Let's just figure out how to scheme them.
Interesting to think what Reese and the guys are going to have to say about this Oklahoma-LSU matchup. It'll go down in the desert. Reese, what do you think?
Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, one of the semifinals in December 28th. LSU taking on Oklahoma. Jesse, it's perceived that LSU just has a massive advantage against the Sooners. Right. What can the Sooners do to keep the thing close or pull the upset?
Jalen Hurts has to be special, guys, and he's played in a lot of big games in his career. He's played against LSU in the past as well, but in this game, he has to be great both throwing the football and running it. He's taken on such a task in this offense, carrying the ball 196 times this season. He is the run game. He's going to have to be physical on design runs and on scrambles and throwing the football. He's going to have to throw it into small windows, take advantage of matchups with CeeDee Lamb, and take care of it. He's turned it over. This offense has turned it over 12 times now in their last 6 games. He just has to play his A-plus game for them to have any shot.
He has to find CeeDee Lamb the minute CeeDee Lamb gets man-to-man coverage. I think that is a mismatch no matter who's covering him, even though on the back end LSU is a talented football team. Oklahoma's had turnover issues in this back half of the season, have to take care of the ball. And then they got 6 sacks against Baylor in the Big 12 championship game. They have to duplicate that. Take their chances. Try to see if you can get to Joe Burrow, because do not let him sit in the pocket and take advantage of Jefferson and Chase and those guys downfield.
You got to tackle him when you get there, too. That's one of the biggest issues you've seen. But I tell you what, LSU's defense, they have to continue to play really, really well. They've kind of ascended through the last half of the season and, rush the quarterback better. They're going to have to get pressure on Jalen Hurts, tackle Jalen Hurts to the ground. Yeah. You have to get him on the ground. He's another guy that's really physical, big, stocky cat.
But you really think there's no chance? You think Oklahoma is completely overmatched in this game?
Something about Mayer. You're saying there's a chance? No. I don't see any way.
Joe Burrow?
Form. I think Joe Burrow has been too good, too surgical. Oklahoma doesn't have any answers where they can consistently stop him.
It's an improved Oklahoma defense. The Oklahoma defense at least gives them a puncher's chance. They haven't had one in any semifinal before.
Now think about this. Jalen Hurts has played on teams 3-0 against LSU. But pick any of those games, and 11 points would have won any of them. 1 point would have won 2 of them. Wouldn't bet on that this time.
Welcome back to Championship Drive Rankings Reveal, presented by Capital One. Oftentimes, when you're splitting hairs, it comes down to style points. It appears that was the case with LSU jumping Ohio State in the overall rankings. Reese Davis earlier today spoke with committee chair Rob Mullins about just that.
Rob, let's start at the top. LSU overtakes Ohio State. Why?
Well, I mean, you got two complete teams, obviously. They've both added a conference championship. And when we're comparing schedule strength, you've got LSU 4-0 against teams in the top 13, Ohio State 5-0 against teams in the top 21. It was really close. I mean, we've spent the entire ranking season, the 6 weeks of just, one going above the other, just by a tick. And this week we saw, or the last couple of weeks, we've seen an LSU defense healthy and playing better. Continued quality play out of Joe Burrow at the quarterback position. And this week we just felt that LSU deserved that number 1 seed going into the playoff.
Okay, Rob, I'm not asking you to give me names, but last week Ohio State was number 1 and they had a solid victory too. How many voters on the committee changed their minds? Well, how different was the vote?
I don't get to see the exact vote, but, it was a similar debate that we've had every week. These teams have been extremely close. We've gone round and round each week, and we've shared that with you here on this show. But again, it's just one does something to move just above. One improves in an element to move just above. I think the key elements this week where the last couple of weeks we've seen an LSU defense that's healthy, playing solid, and you add to that an impressive win against a Georgia team that was our number 4 team last week, moved LSU that one last time just above Ohio State.
The perception has been, and look, selection is not reflective of performance. Who knows how the teams are going to play once the semifinals come in 3 weeks. The perception right now is, though, that 1 versus 2 was a massive deal because number 2 is going to have to play Clemson. How was that addressed in the committee room during the discussions?
That's really not addressed. Our job is to rank the best teams. And as you've seen every week, and we've spent considerable time talking about these teams, and they've been very close. And we've been measuring them at a very detailed level. And when you look at it again, when we're looking at the protocol, they're both conference champions. They both have similar schedule strength, so we're into a lot of other elements. And those elements are, we're talking about win against a number 5 or what was a number 4 Georgia team, a win against what was a number 8 Wisconsin team. You're evaluating offenses. Again, quality quarterback play, Joe Burrow a difference maker, Chase Young a difference maker. All those things are part of the conversation. And, it's been every week. And again, it's not somebody slipping back. It's somebody just doing something to move up above. And at the end, it was LSU number 1.
You've alluded to victories over ranked teams. When differentiating very narrow margins between the top 2, between LSU and Ohio State, what emphasis is placed on that as opposed to some of the other metrics, whether it be strength of record, whether it be a Sagarin, an FPI, a forward-looking measure? How would you describe just victories over teams that you guys wind up having ranked as opposed to some of the other mathematical-based, more objective measures?
Yeah, we're looking at full resumes. And when we're looking at those full resumes, obviously where teams are ranked pops off the screen at us. And that's why I mentioned schedule strength is a piece of that. And we know that LSU had 4 wins against teams that'll be in the top 13. Ohio State had 5 that'll be in the top 21. So we're comparing those very closely. It's an important element.
Rob Mullins with Reese Davis earlier today. I thought that what stood out to me, he says, one does something to move just ahead of the other. He cited the healthy defense of LSU and the win against Georgia. Greg, in your opinion, did Ohio State deserve to hang on to the number 1 spot?
They deserved it, but LSU also deserved to make their case for the number 1 spot. So I know it sounds like I'm straddling the fence, but had Ohio State been at 1, you would have heard no complaining from me. LSU being at 1, I think the committee got it right. That's how I would have had it, just based on how dominant they were in the final week of the season against a quality opponent that had only lost 1 game by 3 points. And granted, that game against South Carolina for Georgia, it's awful. But they had not been blown out like that in quite some time. For LSU to make such quick work in a pseudo-road environment in Atlanta, just 90 miles down the road from Athens, that was a remarkably dominant performance. And I think it eased the concern that the committee had about LSU's defense these last couple weeks.
Yeah, I look at it as 2 teams and which way they were trending. That's the way the committee looked at it, even though they won't say it. You had one team in LSU that started trending upwards because of their defense. You had another team in Ohio State that wasn't trending upwards because of their defense. And that's why they flip-flopped them, because when you watch not just the Wisconsin game, you can go back to the Michigan game that put almost 100. You go back to the Penn State game that they started to run the ball very well on Ohio State. And then you're saying, well, wait a minute. Did Ohio State peak too soon? Or are they really just not good? And when I say not that good, as in number one in the nation, not that good. So that's where the committee decided to flip-flop them. It makes sense.
Two things for me. One, the number 14. One team was down 14 at halftime and needed a massive comeback. One team was up 14 at halftime. There's a very big difference in that. And two, and Greg, you know this, I had Georgia. Do you have Georgia this year?
I did not have Georgia.
So I had Georgia twice this year. I know how ridiculously good their defense is.
Right.
No one had scored 21 on them all year. LSU did it relatively easily, right? I mean, so that is saying something, how good Georgia's defense is.
And they didn't have injuries on the defense side.
Correct. And LSU did it handily. I mean, that has to, when you watch a team do that to a defense like that, you go, wow. I mean, they're literally doing something no one else in the country was able to do against them all year. So there's value in that.
Here, I think the gripe, though, for Ohio State fans is that, hey, we just ran a 3-game gauntlet against Penn State, where LSU was playing Arkansas. And then we had to play Michigan, while LSU was playing a 7-5 Texas A&M team. And then they came into their championship setting.
Crimea River.
I'm not
LSU
saying,
had to play Auburn.
I agree with
LSU then had to turn around and play Bama.
Ohio State fans right now will gripe and they'll say, look at the 3-game gauntlet that we just had to navigate through. Yeah, we came out of the gates a little slow against a good Wisconsin team. But you know what? Once we got everything figured out at halftime, we lit them up for 24 consecutive points.
You get no excuses because LSU had to have the same or had a similar gauntlet when they were going through their schedule, and we knocked LSU for it, right? That was why we put LSU down to number 2 because we said, what happened to the defense here? Oh, we played so-and-so. We played Auburn. We played Alabama. We don't care. All we're telling you is what we see on the field, and what we saw was a defense giving up points.
Listen, if Ohio State's going to win the national championship, they were going to have to beat one of them anyway. You know, and now they have the chance to be one of the best teams ever.
Right.
I mean, they got a chance to beat the 28-game win streak Clemson, and then go beat an LSU team who some people think is the best SEC offense ever, right? And so if Ohio State and their fans and their team are as good as kind of we think they are and even themselves think they are.
Well, I think the offense is. I'm still not sold on the defense. I think the offense definitely is. You know what? Let me rephrase that. The defense can cover very well. Yeah. They play cat coverage as good as anybody in the league.
Okay.
When it talks about toughness, though, if someone really decides if DeAndre Swift were healthy in that Georgia game and decide we're going to barrel down and we're going to run it north and south for 3 quarters and then see what happens in the fourth, I don't think LSU. I'm talking about LSU's defense. I don't think they hold up.
And maybe pressuring the quarterback. I want to dig a little bit deeper.
Checks in the mail from Coach O and Dave Aranda because they're feeding off of some of those questions.
Great, because I want to see it. That's my whole point. I want to turn the film and be like, wow, these athletes are as good as advertised. I want to see it.
I hear you.
Film a little bulletin board material here. I want to just take a step back, though, and dig a little bit deeper, Dan, into the season that LSU has had, right? I mean, the reformation of Joe Burrow as a quarterback and the Heisman Trophy winner in a matter of days, right? The perfect season, the way that they had to beat teams, the schedule that they had. I mean, how do we digest exactly what we saw from LSU over the past 13 games?
The biggest thing is a coach comes in and sets cultures, right? Like Coach O has set a culture at LSU. It goes to the next level when your best player becomes your hardest worker and then applies the culture. Joe Burrow did that. And I said this morning, the most fascinating thing about Joe Burrow is when you're a quarterback, to get those guys to truly believe in you, and it doesn't necessarily matter what about your performance on the football field. Like the way you talk about yourself, the way you talk about your teammates, the way you pick them up, the way you love on them, the way you work, the way you show up, the way you compete. Joe Burrow did that. And I think that's what we saw at LSU this year was like all the kids on that football team looked at Joe Burrow and said, I will literally run through a wall for you. Like it became that. And I think that's why we saw the performance, not only at times dominance, but in moments, right? That mattered.
He's become an icon. And then you go with the Cajun spelling on the back of your jersey and you endear yourself. No question about it here. Much more, of course, on that game, both semifinal games, but of course, a lot of other bowl games revealed today. We're going to dig into the matchup. Welcome back. Kevin Connors, Greg McElroy, Jonathan Vilma, Dan Orlovsky. The All-State the Rose Bowl game presented by Northwestern Mutual is set. Oregon versus Wisconsin. Both teams acquitted themselves quite nicely in their respective conference championship games.
That guy's pretty good, Russell Wilson.
Not bad.
He's not too bad.
Never heard of him.
Doing big things now. This, of course, a rematch of the 2012 matchup. This Chip congratulating Russell No doubt telling him you'll go on to have a great NFL career. So there it is, number 6 versus number 8. JV, the initial question I have, who imposes their will? Will it be Jonathan Taylor and that Badgers O-line, or will it be an Oregon D that finished 10th in the nation against the run?
Well, I'm going to answer that one short by Jonathan Taylor, but on the flip side, Oregon's offensive line is going to impose their will on Wisconsin's defensive line. I'm telling you, they run the ball very well. C.J. Verdell, very, very good running back. They are built, Oregon's built like an SEC team every time I look at them.
What Oregon offense shows up?
Yeah.
Right? Like what? I mean, not even just the players, but some of the play calls too. Like, are they going to unleash number 10, Justin Herbert? Like when they unleash and really get fun with their offense, utilize their run game, get some play action shots downfield, and also his legs, like allowing him to be a little bit more of a runner because he's such a good athlete will be really interesting to me because I feel like there's at times this year where they play a little handcuffed on offense. They really do. And they're going to have to open it up because this is a really good Wisconsin defense. And Jamie Leonard does a great job with his scheme. Run game will be a fascinating part because as good as Jonathan Taylor's been, you can make the case that C.J. Verdell has had just as impressive of a year. I mean, he's averaging 6.5 per carry. You talked about the Oregon offensive line. So that'll be something that I really want to pay attention to is does Oregon's offense open it up a little bit, have a little fun with some of your play calls, and then which run game truly shows up?
To comment on that quickly, because I had Coach Cristobal at Miami. He was our offensive line coach. He wants to set the tone. He has an ego. And so his thing is about we are going to be the big brawly, impose our will type of guy. So when you talk about opening the offense, I already know the mindset of Cristobal. He doesn't want to open the offense. He wants to beat you up first.
He doesn't want to lose the game. You know,
exactly.
Good enough run game. We're not going to lose
Good enough run game,
right.
and then he'll start to throw the ball.
No, I think it's a really interesting matchup because I think Wisconsin has built an identity as that trench power eye, downhill rushing attack, create more gaps in the run game, great physical running backs, and that's what Oregon wants to become. Now, they're not there yet, but like y'all alluded to, 4 senior offensive linemen playing their final game, the best left tackle in college football, a veteran quarterback that grew up less than 3 miles from the stadium. So this game is huge as far as reestablishing the fact that Oregon is now going to become a national player. They burst onto the scene this year. They played well against Auburn, came up short in that game, reeled off a really nice stretch of victories against all their Pac-12 foes up until that game against Arizona State. This could be the statement, though, where, hey, we're not going anywhere. This was the first year that we're back. Don't expect us to be anywhere near the mediocrity that we were over the last decade because they are about to, I think, assert themselves in the Pac-12.
I sure hope so because we're always talking about them being on the cusp, and then they have a primetime game, a big game.
Yeah.
And they lay an egg. I really hope that this is
themselves. I mean, you think about the way they played in that Arizona State.
We would be talking about them in the playoffs.
I mean, they'd be in. I mean, it's
they'd be in.
You can't have those stuff.
Well, and then they struggled the next week against Oregon State, and you wonder, and then they go out and they blow the doors off of Utah.
Who had a really, really good defensive line.
Yeah,
right? They beat them up.
And they ran it right down their throat.
Yes, they did.
I mean, that was an impressive performance.
By the way, there had to be a lot of people in the Pac-12 offices saying, no, we need Utah to get there. And, of course, it doesn't happen, and the Big 12 steals the spot. All right, that, of course, is the Rose Bowl game presented by Northwestern Mutual. A look at the All-State Sugar Bowl, Georgia versus Baylor. How about both of these teams coming up on the short end of their conference championship games? But the Dogs' lone losses are to LSU and, of course, that anomaly against South Carolina. Both of Baylor's losses to Oklahoma. Greg, the most intriguing aspect of this game to you is what?
I just want to see at some point this season, and you only have 60 more minutes, I want to see Georgia's offense start to look like they have the talent that they have. Because they have good personnel. They have a great offensive line. They have a veteran quarterback. And Jake Fromm, frankly, has not had a very good season. He hasn't been as accurate, hasn't been as decisive, and hasn't had the same velocity on the throws that we saw in previous years. I think part of that has to do with the rapport that he has with the wide receivers or lack thereof. So it's really been concerning. Now, you get a team that's coming in that really prides himself on the defense side. Baylor's really good on defense, and they're going to make life really difficult for Georgia. And if you look at how Georgia played last year in the Sugar Bowl game, it was an embarrassing performance in a lot of ways.
I'm glad you mentioned
an embarrassing performance.
Because this is going to be one of the best coaching jobs or the worst coaching jobs Kirby Smart has ever done because it's the second time around that you're facing a Big 12 team, and we talk about Big 12 stinks, no defense, etc. You laid an egg last year. Remember, it was, oh, Texas is back. They were so far from back. They just weren't good. Georgia laid an egg. Now this year, how are you going to get your guys motivated? Because good coaches motivate their players. They find ways. Look at Dabo Swinney, all up and down the media talking about they're an underdog. They're undefeated, defending national champs. Somehow he has everyone believing they're an underdog. What is Kirby Smart going to do to elevate his team and get them motivated to play against
This would
Baylor?
be a little bit of an old school kind of smack you in the mouth football game. You alluded to Baylor's defense. Georgia's just as good. Talked about it at the beginning of the show how good both of these defenses are, how well coached they are. They make you play from such a deficit offensively, right? Like, Georgia's going to have to do something on offense because their defense is going to slow down whatever Baylor is able to do offensively, Charlie Brewer and Denzel Mims. But we've seen this Baylor defense a couple times on national TV have some really strong performance, like really good moments, right? And so it'll be a little bit of an old school football game. I think there's a lot of questions to the football game. Is Matt Rule going to be at Baylor? I mean, that is a fair question to ask right now with the job has he done. Is Jake Fromm going to make a decision on the NFL before the football game?
He better stay.
Is Lawrence Cager going to play? What's his health? What's Blaylock's health? Like, there's a lot of
Torn hamstring, he's not going to play in the game.
So I mean, there's layers to this with this football game. You can make the case that this is a really big game for Georgia for next year.
For sure.
You know, like
100%.
they better go play well for Kirby Smart's football team building into next year.
You mentioned the name Matt Rule. Let's assume for a minute that he stays. I mean, think about the depths of where this program was to the fact that they're playing in this level of game. I mean, it's remarkable what he's done in just a short amount of time.
1-11.
Coach of the year.
He started 1-11 first year.
He is the coach of the year.
100%.
All respect to a bunch of other coaches, what Matt Rule has done, and in the moments where he had to go play really good. I mean, pushed Oklahoma to the brink with their third-string quarterback, or third-string quarterback at some point this past weekend. So, coach of the year.
You shuddered when Dan was saying, does Jake Fromm come back? I mean, what kind of a challenge is he going to face against this Baylor D?
With the Baylor, they don't have to do anything special against Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm has just been flat out inaccurate. He just doesn't throw the ball well. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if he's injured. Listen, what I see every time, I'm like, what the hell, Jake Fromm? Every time I look, I'm like, what's going on?
If you're gonna knock Tua sometimes, man, his receivers are so great. Then we have to give Jake Fromm a little bit of leniency because his receivers have been so young and so underperforming as well.
And so inconsistent. If you just look at the South Carolina game and we pin those 4 turnovers on Jake Fromm. Well, one, the receiver slipped inside, should have been outside. One, hits him right in the face mask, tipped.
I'm not talking about that game. Let's go back to 48% completion.
In weather twice.
Correct.
So let's take that into account. He did have to play in against A&M in bad weather and earlier in the season against Kentucky in horrendous weather. So
I'm talking about the last 4 weeks. He has been under 50% completion.
Yes.
We can talk about weather. We can talk about weather.
Jake Fromm has been a massively
this is what happened.
Quarterback.
Yes, he's been underperforming. When you watch him play, and I've seen him make those same throws.
Correct.
So that's my issue. You've made these throws. You've made them in tight windows. When you lost to Florida last year, Jake Fromm went on a tear, and we were like, oh my gosh, he has arrived finally. This year, he started off well. Then it's just been a decline, a steady decline. And then you watch, and you're like, you made these throws. What's going on, Jake Fromm? I hear about the receivers, but I also know you're throwing the spots on the field. So if you're telling me that the receivers aren't getting to the spots,
if you don't trust that they're going to get there, it's hard to throw them to those spots. That's the problem.
I hear a lot of excuses for a quarterback that should be playing a lot better.
I'm saying that it's really hard to play quarterback by yourself. And when there are guys that you don't trust out there on the perimeter, it's really hard to cut it loose and anticipate throws.
We'll see. I can't wait to see the
I can't
wait to see the
in John's defense, I do think this is a big game for him. I really do. I think that whether he decides to go or not, I think it's a really big, likely, right? But I think this game will go a long way in quieting to some of the conversation that we're having into the offseason, because some of their young receivers will obviously be a year older.
And knowing Field, he's always going to be linked to Justin Fields, and he's had such a great year, and there's already people that have questioned, well, did they pick the wrong quarterback? He needs to go out, play well, get some momentum created, because you know where Georgia's going to be next year? Right back in this exact same position. They're going to have a really good team coming back and likely have a chance to make a playoff run.
Yeah.
All-State Sugar Bowl ought to be a fun watch. You know what else is always a fun watch?
What?
When Ed Ogeron's on TV and he's breaking down his team, 13-0, number 1 team heading into the college football playoff. Made it respectable in the second half, never could catch up to Bama. in the 45-35 loss. Kevin Connors, Greg McElroy, Coach Jim Mora, happy to be joined now by the always dapper Emmanuel Acho.
Gentlemen.
Here in studio. Ach, the guys have been talking about it here. This would seem anyway to be on paper to be a really tall order for Oklahoma to beat LSU. How do you view the challenge ahead for the Sooners?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a tall order. It's going to be very hard to do. But I think Lincoln Riley, if anybody, is one man to do it. An incredible head coach. You give him time to scheme up this Oklahoma offense to try to figure out some different wrinkles. But what it's going to come down to is a gadget play here, a gadget play there, scoring on special teams, and trying to turn over Joe Burrow. Because firepower for firepower, man for man, Oklahoma doesn't have the same depth that LSU has.
No, I agree with you there. For me, I don't think that Oklahoma has the defensive personnel to stick with LSU. I simply don't see it, and I think that it's going to show up in the secondary. Yeah. And LSU is going to get some of those empty sets, and they're going to get the ball out quick. And I don't know that they can get them covered. Now, for me, the wild card is a winner. A winner's a winner's a winner. Jalen Hurts is a winner. He's 38-3. He's been in this situation before. He's a high-character guy. He's a great leader. His team's going to follow him. He plays with great poise. He's a tremendous decision maker. Like Arch says, maybe he makes some plays. Lincoln Riley's going to come up with some great gadgets, but I think LSU will figure him out.
The only problem that I have with what you just said, I think he has done a great job in crunch time. And when the game's on the line in a gotta-have-it situation, the fourth quarter against Kansas State when they came roaring back, in the second half, obviously, without CeeDee Lamb against Baylor, the way they played down the stretch there. But then there's been other times where he's put them a little bit behind the eight ball by being loose with the football. He's fumbled the football on multiple occasions. He's also made some really costly interceptions from time to time. You can't do that.
Well, that happens when you're trying to do too much. You're trying to you recognize the fact that if you don't make a play, and CD doesn't make a play, and that's you getting the ball to CD, that nobody's going to make a play, and so you start to press. And you know what? In a game like this, you're exactly right. That's going to be a factor because he's going to say, I've got to make the play.
Do it. I got to be the guy.
Here's the issue when playing at LSU, especially as a defender, they keep throwing blows. I mean, they just keep throwing punch after punch after punch. You get a stop. You breathe a sigh of relief. You got him on 3rd and 18, coach, and before you know it, Joe Burrow hits another one of their receivers for a huge gain. You can't ever check out mentally against LSU. We talked about it, Coach, last game. Can you stay locked in for 8 seconds of play for about 80 plays after each possession, after each drive for the duration of the game? That's where I think Oklahoma's going to struggle because usually against a team like you can have a mental error and they might not capitalize. Not against Joe Burrow, not against LSU.
Tall order indeed. I think we're all on the same page about that. The Big 12 champions, maybe they're the ones that should be taking the Clemson approach, right? Like little chip on our shoulder. Hey, no one thinks we belong here. And maybe some people reasonably feel that way. Anyway, the Valero Alamo Bowl is set. The Utah Utes. What is that you said? Utes taking on the Texas Longhorns. Texas, of course, acquitted itself rather nicely in its bowl matchup a season ago in the Sugar Bowl. Coach, the Utah Utes, I mean, Pac-12 championship game, golden opportunity to steal that spot for Oklahoma, and they came up real short.
Yeah, a very disappointing night for Utah. So unlike what they've been all year. You know, they've played such great defense all year. They've controlled the line of scrimmage all year. And Friday night they didn't do that, and Oregon did. Now, Oregon came in there, I think, we'd kind of written them off as a really good football team. Boy, they've run the ball a year. They played great defense all year. We know that Justin Herbert's a good player. But I think that Utah is going to come out with a chip on their shoulder. I think they are very talented. I think they do play tremendous defense. I think Huntley is a good quarterback. I think they can run the ball with Moss. And I look for them to come out and play very, very well. Kyle Willingham, he'll do a tremendous job of getting them back on track.
Yeah, I saw this game and I said, boy, Texas better buckle up.
Yeah.
They better buckle up because to Coach's point, Utah's going to be upset. And Utah isn't a team with a whole bunch of prideful players that are thinking about the NFL, G-Mac. Utah, they're not going to have star players sitting out. They're not going to have guys that are checked out. They just lost a Pac-12 championship game that they know would have sent them to the playoffs. Now they're playing a Texas team that is in so much inner turmoil right now. Demoted its offensive coordinator. Fired its defensive coordinator, got rid of its receivers coach, sitting at 7-6 right now, and there's a huge difference, or 7-5 rather. There's a huge difference, coach. You know this between 8-5 and 7-6.
No doubt.
A huge difference specifically for that Texas program.
It's going to be all about the offseason because if you look at Utah, disappointing performance in the Pac-12 championship game. The recipe for them is a little similar to what Texas's recipe was last year in the Sugar Bowl. A lot of guys playing their final game. If you look at that Utah roster, a lot of seniors that'll be going out there wearing the Utah uniform for the final time. They want to make a statement. I think Texas is going to have their hands full because on the defensive side, they're not overwhelmingly physical. They've struggled so far in coverage throughout most of the season. They've given up a ton of big plays, and I think Utah is going to have a serious chip on their shoulder, knowing what could have been in the playoff or the Rose Bowl, and obviously what is in the Alamo.
And one final thing to that is, remember, Utah's going to the Alamo Bowl, which for them, huge, kind of still a big game, traveling to another state. For Texas, you're driving an hour and a half down to San Antonio, and you know that.
Kev, Coach Maura Ach and Greg McElroy, North Carolina season storylines. Hey, they got off to an exciting start, rallying from a double-digit deficit in the fourth quarter, and the win over South Carolina beat Miami to get off to the 2-0 start. Took Clemson to the brink, and then Mac and the guys needed wins in their final two games to become bowl eligible, and they got them. They beat Mercer and then NC State in the regular season finale to become bowl eligible. We found out where they're going. They're going to the Military Bowl. They get the Temple Owls, who lost in the 2018 Independence Bowl. Last time Temple was bowl eligible. That should be a fascinating matchup. You'll see it December 27th, noon Eastern on ESPN. And we are so thrilled to welcome in our pal Mack Brown, head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. Coach, year one, headed to the Military Bowl. What's your reaction to leading the Tar Heels back to bowl play?
I'm very excited. I told the guys about a year ago when I first met them that don't have anything planned for Christmas because we're going to be in a bowl somewhere. And we came down to the end, but they made me right. It's an exciting time. We're excited about the matchup with Temple, even though Emmanuel, I know Nagandi, my buddy for 4 years, is going to be pulling hard against me. So I got to just throw him out of the way. Family is not family when it comes to a Temple Owl. So I get that. He loves me, but not enough to pull for me. So I got it. I understand where that puts us. But Kevin, the three guys up there would tell you, if you're not going to be in the playoff and you're not going to be in one of the top bowls in the country, you want to be in the best bowl for your team. And this is close enough for all of our fans to drive to Annapolis a couple of days after Christmas. We'll have a wonderful Christmas party while we're there, but also our players can drive, and that way players get to make a little money. So we want our fans making a lot of noise in Annapolis and our players making some money and playing well because we need to come away with a winning season.
Coach, Emmanuel Lacho here. You had so many spectacular moments this season, dancing post-game, you running on the field after a win. What was the biggest highlight for you of this football season?
I think the biggest highlight had to be beating NC State soundly in the end because that sent us to a bowl. We had beaten Duke earlier. We beat two of our rivals. And, we had the close loss to Clemson, and you're not into moral victories. We didn't pull it out in the end. We had the great comeback wins against Miami and against South Carolina. But really and truly, Emmanuel, it was important for us to get the extra practices because we're really young. It's important for us to have another chance to have a winning season because we've won 6 games this year and guys have won 5 over the previous 2 years. And it's important for them to continue to learn how to win. And Temple's a great opponent. Rod's done a tremendous job there. They won 8 games. I called games for them in my 5 years off, and at the same time, I've watched them some this year. So it'll also be a real challenge for us and a lot of fun.
Coach Greg McElroy, congrats on a remarkable season. You referenced having a winning season and going 7-6, the difference between that and obviously 6-7. How does that help you on the recruiting trail? Because obviously we know the arrow is pointing up for the Tar Heels. You're very excited about the recruiting class that you're putting together right now. I know you can't talk about those guys specifically, but how can winning in the postseason benefit the perception of your program heading into year 2?
Greg, everybody wants to win, and this stuff doesn't work unless you win. You can talk all you want to, but if you're not winning, they're going to quit listening. And the fact that we did get better as the season went on, we found ways to win. We lost. We found some ways to lose at times with 2 overtime games we lost. but we found ways to win in the end. And now, at a time where there are a lot of teams that nobody's talking about tonight, you guys are talking about us. And that's important for the recruits because they want to go to bowl games, they want to win, and they want the air to be up. They want you to be trending up, and right now our team and our recruiting is trending up.
Coach, it's Jim Mora. How you doing today?
I'm fine, Coach.
Hey, you took 5 years off, as you mentioned, and you came back, and it looked to me like you were having the time of your life. Is that the truth?
Jim, it is. I promised Sally that I'd handle losing better. I lied. Losing's not fun. It still stinks. But I love being around the kids. I love competing. I love the fact that when they win, they're so excited and they feel better about themselves. We were telling our story at the first of the year, and then I had to get a dance contest to pick things up. So I screwed it up. I started Dre Bly had a dance contest before every team meeting, and Emmanuel knows I can't dance. And he saw that for
You've gotten
years.
better, Coach.
Now it is. Well, they're winning a little more, so I'm having to do it more often, Emmanuel. But I said that I told my story. They told their story. Everybody danced but me. Players in the end said, "Okay, dance." I said, "I don't dance." They said, No. You said all in, man. You tell your story, we tell our story, you dance. So I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. You beat South Carolina, I'll dance. So I didn't think we were going to beat South Carolina. we beat them. We're leaving the field. I'm walking in. Sally says, you better get ready. And I said, what do you mean? She said, they're going to expect you to dance. And I said, nah, they've forgotten about that. I walked in. They said, dance. I said, oh, my God. So, therefore, it has gotten a little better. Someone could actually see what I was doing after the NC State game, and there was a name for it. So that's the first time.
Yeah, we all have our limitations, Coach. That was a remarkable performance, though, just given the abilities that you have on the dance floor. I do want to ask you, your quarterback, Sam Howell, we all expected him to have a nice year. And honestly, Coach, I've watched him. I've been impressed. And then I looked at the numbers. I was like, oh, my goodness, 35 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions. What can you say about how he's grown into the position and how he's led your team?
Greg, number one, he's thought about this position his whole life, so it's not too big for him. He grew up as a coach's son, and both mom and dad are athletes at Appalachian State, and he wanted to be this guy. Then he came in early, and he's just a natural. He's so accurate with the ball, and he's tough. When we lost our backup quarterback, Jace Reuter, we didn't have any experience behind him, so we couldn't even run fast. We just had to say, don't run, man, throw it away, because we don't want you getting hurt. And I think the upside is really, really good. He never got his ego out of line. He never got so numbers were more important than winning. As he continued to grow in the offense, he did a tremendous job leading with our defense, our special teams, and the future's very, very good for Sam down the road.
Hey, Coach, look, I know, at least I don't think anyway, that you're getting paychecks from us anymore, but I want to put you back into the old role you used to have here because no one played Clemson closer than you did all year. How were you able to do so, and how were you able to contain that explosive offense?
The thing that happens, if you watch Dabo's teams, they struggle more early than they do late. They are really good right now. And we slowed the game down. We huddled more. We're a tempo offense, but we wanted to shorten the game as much as we could and keep it out of their hands. We wanted to stay balanced on offense and go for a lot of fourth downs because we needed to stay on the field. And at that time, we were more healthy in the secondary, so we could give them a really healthy look of disguise. And we moved our safeties around. We played a lot of different zones and man, and we were the best defense that day we were all year. And we got a turnover, too. So everything happened that day for us. We just needed to make the two-point play at the end. But now I laugh at Dabo. We set 50-50 balls outside, guys, when our receivers are going up for a ball. Clemson calls it 80-20. and I think that's true because they're tall outside, and you have to stack the box to stop Trevor Lawrence and ETN. And then when you spread out and you stack the box, you can't cover those guys one-on-one. You spread out, they're going to run the ball. So I do think that Clemson has a chance to be playing in the final game again.
Well, look, I know that they're excited about.
And no, And no, Kevin, you are not paying me anymore, by the way.
Appreciate the distinction there, Coach. And look, I know that they're excited down in Chapel Hill about Cole Anthony, but I know that they're real excited that the Tar Heels are headed back to a bowl game. Coach, congratulations and all the very best to you, and have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on. Happy holidays for you, and appreciate what you guys do.
Congratulations, Coach. Kevin Connors back with you in studio. The matchups are set. Only real intrigue in the unfolding of things at the top. LSU jumping Ohio State on the strength of their win over Georgia in the SEC championship game. They are number one. The Buckeyes of the Ohio State University 13-0 on the season. That dynamic offense, incredible Chase Young-led defense. They lock up the number 2 spot and the golden opportunity of taking on number 3, Clemson. Trevor Lawrence and the Tigers a bit shaky at the start of the year, and then they came on like gangbusters, flat out running teams en route to an ACC championship victory. And then Oklahoma, a little intrigue going into the Big 12 championship game, but they handled their business. They, in fact, get in to the college football playoff. A look at our reporters covering all that's gone down. Marty Smith, Tom Rinaldi, Gene Wojciechowski, Maria Taylor on the way in just a bit, but we begin with the number 1 team in college football, Marty Smith on the Bayou Bengals.
The instant Ohio State was revealed as the number 2 team in the college football playoff rankings, there was an audible roar directly above us here at the LSU football facility as the Tigers realized they were number 1. Now they head to Atlanta to face Lincoln Riley and the Oklahoma Sooners. Coach Ed Orgeron came downstairs and chatted with me, said he's extremely impressed with what Riley has done in Norman with that prolific offense, now led by Jalen Hurts. Coach O has faced Hurts before when he was the quarterback at Alabama, said he was extremely impressed with Hurts' ability to run the football. They'll have to be very sound defensively to slow that offense down. The players off here today at LSU as the coaches are off on the recruiting trail, but one player did show up for treatment. The guy who might hoist the Heisman next weekend, quarterback Joe Burrow. Now let's head up to Columbus, Ohio, and Tom Rinaldi, who's with the Buckeyes. Tom?
The plan for Sunday for Ohio State was simple. After winning the Big Ten title in Indy, return to campus and then gather as a team to watch the final ranking. Ohio State entered Sunday the number 1 team in the country, but in the final CFP ranking, number 2. The reaction inside the room was interesting. Some disappointment, initial silence, but quickly a round of applause and excitement, perhaps even with an echo of defiance. Ryan Day addressed the team almost immediately after with a very simple message. The ranking does not matter. What does? It's a 2-game season. And to get where we want to go, to a national title, we'd have to beat the best teams anyway. Day now hits the road in recruiting, while the Ohio State Buckeyes rest, recover, and then resume practice later this week.
Thanks, Tom. Well, as the championship playoff selection Sunday dust settles, Clemson is rolling out of their pizza party, but Dabo Swinney had a message he wanted delivered to his team as soon as the announcement was made, and that's that they're making history. For the first time since 1966, they're a team that started number 1 in the country, went undefeated, and finished number 3. That's right, he's placing that chip back squarely on his shoulders. Well, afterwards, he made sure that his team took some time to celebrate the fact that they are in the playoff and have an opportunity to prove it, and that's exactly what they want to do looking forward. Now we go to Gene Wojciechowski in Norman, Oklahoma with the Sooners.
Thanks, Maria. Oklahoma fans think their season was saved at Baylor in November when OU overcame a 25-point deficit. But the truth is, according to Lincoln Riley, the season might have been saved after a loss at Kansas State. That's when Riley told his team, stay focused. Other teams are going to lose. Just start winning again. And that's exactly what happened. Riley also mentioned quarterback Jalen Hurts. He thinks Hurts deserves an invitation to New York for that Heisman ceremony. And a quick history lesson. The last time Oklahoma and LSU met was all the way back in 2003 at the Sugar Bowl for the national championship. That night, Nick Saban's LSU team beat Bob Stoops' OU team 21-14. Back to you.
All right, Gino, thanks so much. Well, Vegas got busy pretty quickly, making out the lines. Look at that, LSU -10. That might be attractive to some folks who maybe feel that the game might be decided by more than just 10 points. Over under 77, and then Ohio State and Clemson. Look how tight it is. Tigers -2. Reese and the guys breaking down the national semifinals.
First time in the history of the college football playoff that neither Alabama nor Clemson are number one in the rankings, so that might be a mild surprise, but no big surprise as to who got in. You've got LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma. You do have LSU moving to number one. You have any big surprise of what you saw from the committee?
No, I think all of us kind of had the opinion that whoever you put there, you can put there, and we're not going to argue with you. But I think you look at the final polls and you look at LSU and who they beat. You beat 4 teams in the top 13. It's a pretty good resume. You have the best quarterback in the country. That's pretty daggum good things to point to. And also, defense peaking and playing better the last couple days. So I think the committee, that's what they said. That's why they put LSU number one.
I was surprised that they moved LSU back to number one. I think a couple weeks back when Ohio State was moved ahead of LSU, the strength of record, strength of schedule was still in LSU's favor, but the committee looked at the Ohio State team and said, overall, we believe they're a better football team. Then Ohio State goes out at Michigan, which is top 14. Then they win the Big Ten championship game. I just thought that Ohio State would stay at number one, but I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with LSU being number one.
I agree with LSU at number one. They're there because of the resume. They're there because they're peaking at the right time. I think if I was Ohio State, I'd be very disappointed with the committee's decision because I'd feel like they're not evaluating all 13 games throughout the course of the year. They beat 5 top 21 teams. They averaged their margin for victory in all of their games this year was 36 points. It was the most in college football, and they've been dominant on both sides of the ball all season long. They've got players on each side that could get invited to New York City for the Heisman Trophy. So picking a team playing its best football now versus the team that played its best over 13 games would make me upset if I'm Ohio State because now I have the toughest road to reach the national championship game having to play Clemson.
That's the deal. Splitting the hairs between number one is hard to pound the fist on the table for either LSU or Ohio State. But all of you guys seem to believe that it is a massive disadvantage to have to face the reigning national champions in the semis.
All right, quick line check now. Get Reese, Jesse, Joey, and David out of there, and we're back.
All right.
Kev, Coach, and Ach here in studio. Look, guys, we talked about it every single Sunday morning, right, on Championship Drive, who's in, who are the 4 teams going to be. I don't think that there's much debate. I think the committee really did get it right. Maybe the only question is Ohio State sitting here saying, you know what, 13-0, we ran the gauntlet in the Big Ten. We won the Big Ten championship. How were we jumped by LSU? Coach, did you have a problem with LSU jumping Ohio State?
I had a slight I wouldn't say a problem. It was curious to me. And here's why it was curious to me is the committee had them first the last 2 weeks. I had LSU first the last 6 weeks. Last night at about 1 o'clock, I just said, you know what, I got to make a decision here. And I said, you know what, I believe in Ohio State. And so I put Ohio State above LSU, and I did it based upon these things. Their scoring differential, 470-point scoring differential. Their opponent winning percentage, 58%, 9 conference games, you know. So the completeness of their team. Now, I also understand why LSU is number one, and the resurgence of their defense. These last 3 weeks, they've only given up 12.3 points per game against some pretty good teams. So while I had OSU number one, it was a tough decision for me. I can certainly understand LSU being number one.
Yeah, for me, Coach, I didn't get as analytical with it because when I looked at all those numbers, there's so many that are in Ohio State's favor, and then there's some that are in LSU's favor. What I did know is the committee gave us a math equation, and their math equation simply said LSU minus defense equals number 2. LSU with defense is number 1. And LSU proved the last 2 weeks that they are more sound or they have fixed some of those defensive woes. Now, we all know Georgia didn't have Pickens for a half, didn't have Cager, didn't have DeAndre Swift. LSU can't dictate who trots out on the football field for the other team. But the committee said and made it clear that LSU was number 2 because of their lack of defense. That became obvious after LSU played Ole Miss. LSU said, okay, committee, we gotcha. Beat Texas A&M. Hold them to 7 points. Dominate Georgia in an SEC championship game. That Georgia essentially had home field advantage in Atlanta. For me, and for that reason, I'm not surprised by it at all. I'm not shocked with it, and I have no issues with it.
You heard Marty Smith in his report say that when LSU was announced as the number 1 team overall, that there was an audible roar coming from the room that the Tigers were pleased that they were the number 1 team in the country. I don't assume that LSU is afraid of playing anybody.
No.
Because they've beaten everybody all year. But does a small part of you, watch from the players' perspective, say, whew, we don't have to play Clemson?
No doubt about it. And I think as a player, you'd be lying if you didn't realize that Clemson presented a bigger challenge than Oklahoma. Offensively, defensively, talent-wise, and just as where both teams are from a health perspective. You would be absolutely lying. I understand players and coaches are supposed to be super macho, but everybody knows that there is a sigh of relief knowing, thank God, we do not got to see Trevor Lawrence and company.
That's true. I understand that point. LSU fears no man, no team, no player.
They've proven that all year long, en route to the 13-0 record and the SEC championship. When we come back, we'll continue.
Three?
It's amazing. It's amazing. I was just told that this morning. I was like, man, we're making a lot of history around here. But we got a good plan together, and we'll be excited about it. We got a little less than 3 weeks now till we kick it off out there in the desert.
All right, we'll see you there, Coach.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ach, I want to ask you this question in as open-ended a way as possible. Nothing loaded about this because I think Clemson's playing better than anybody in college football right now. Why is everyone so afraid of Clemson?
Because they put up video game numbers. KC, I was looking at it, and Coach said before break, Coach Moore, he said, LSU's not afraid to play anybody. I would challenge that and honestly say I don't think Clemson is scared to play anybody. Look at, they won their championship game by 45 points. Game before that, 35 points. Game before that, 49 points. And the game before that, 45 points. It's as if they're playing a video game on the easiest setting possible. And that's why everybody's so afraid.
Yeah. Well, you know what? They'll get the matchup that maybe they want at Ohio State and the chance to move on beyond that. We're excited to move the conversation on and welcome in Jeremy Pruitt, head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. Coach, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us here. Your team gets Indiana in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, January 2nd. You can see the game 7 Eastern here on ESPN. What's your reaction to that matchup?
Our players, our coaches, our fans, we're excited for the opportunity to go to Jacksonville and play Indiana, who's really been a hot team this fall. And, we've turned our season around, and our guys are excited about getting another opportunity.
Let me ask you about that. The 2-5 start to the season, and then you win 5 in a row to finish the season, 4 of those wins coming in SEC play. What exactly is it that changed with your football team?
Well, we have a young football team. We're only playing 7 seniors, and, the season didn't start the way we wanted, but our guys stuck together. I think it speaks volumes about our coaching staff, the culture on our team, the trajectory of our program, and our players are excited to give an opportunity to play again.
Coach, how do you assess where you are in year 2 versus where you wanted to be when you took over in Knoxville?
Well, your record is who you are, and we've owned it. I think that's one of the great things about this team is, when we were 2-5, we owned it. We tried to find a way to fix it, and our guys done a fantastic job believing in what we're trying to get done here, and they worked hard together. They stayed the course, and it showed on the field.
Coach Emmanuel Acho here. Congrats on a great season. How big are these bowl games for you, especially seeing as you have a young team? How big are these bowl practices that you now get because of this bowl game?
Well, it's very important when you go back and work on the fundamentals and you continue to grow as a football team, football program, the player development that goes into it. We'll spend half the time just working on Tennessee before we ever start any bowl prep. So it's almost getting like half of a spring practice there. So it's something that we need. With all the young guys we got, they'll continue to develop as football players, and then we got an opportunity to play a fantastic football team in the end, and it's something that we're excited about.
Coach, I know you've been a part of some really good programs, and when you speak about culture, which is obviously a hot word in coaching, Alabama may have one of the best cultures in the history of the sport. I'm curious to know, what's the culture of Tennessee football? What's the identity of Tennessee football?
Well, I can tell you the guys that are on our football team are hardworking young men. They're great student athletes. They represent the university well. They come to work every single day to improve as a football player, to improve in the classroom. We have a young team. I feel like that the seniors that we got on our football team have set a fantastic example that will carry us on for years to come.
I know you didn't get to see LSU this season, but you did see Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, all teams that LSU beat. As someone who coaches in the SEC, help us put into perspective how tough it is to go 13-0 in your conference as the Tigers did.
Well, the demand week in and week out, getting a team ready to play, being at your best, it's something hard to do in any conference. And it speaks volumes to what Ed Ogeron and his football team have done. They obviously have a few games left here that they've got to be at their best at. And, in this league, in this day in college football, anybody can beat anybody on any given week.
There's no question about that. And I know that your attention now turns to Indiana in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. Coach Pruitt, we appreciate your time and best of luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
Tennessee head football coach Jeremy Pruitt joining us here. A reminder that the playoff is set. And again, no real surprises. LSU, Oklahoma in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, and then in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. Ohio State and Clemson battling out in a game that could very well have been the national championship, and I don't think anybody would have complained about that. So strange to talk about that bracket, the reveal, and not talk about Alabama, but they are in the Verbo Citrus Bowl. The Crimson Tide, number 13. They get number 14, Michigan. New Year's Day, 1 Eastern on ABC. Outside of those semifinal matchups, one of the most tantalizing matchups that we'll see all bowl season. They collide in the Verbo Citrus Bowl. Let's go stir up the hornet's nest right here, Otz. All right, you know what? We've held off on the Alabama discussion for a while here. We've got the 4 teams in the college football playoff. Yeah. Are the 4 best teams in the college football playoff? And when I ask you that, I mean, is Alabama the 4th best team in the country that just doesn't have the resume?
When you look at the landscape of college football, I look at it like this. To me, Coach, there really isn't a huge difference between teams 4 and teams about 15 and 16. Michigan, Wisconsin, Alabama, Oklahoma, Baylor, as we saw. All of those teams, to me, I think on any given Saturday could beat the other team. The top 3, they speak for themselves. But 4 to 16, to me, it's a big mush pile. So now when you ask the question, who's really the 4th best team, I theoretically answer it as who could play the best on that day, and I think who has the most talent. I think Alabama has a roster laden with talent. The problem is when you lost Tua, you lost a distributor to all of that talent. So to answer your question, KC, sure. You could make the argument that Alabama is one of the 4 best teams, but the problem is you could make the argument, I think, for about 8 or so teams, so I have no issue with where they sit.
Yeah, I could make the argument for Alabama. I don't think I could make it for Oregon. I don't think I could make it for Baylor, Wisconsin, Florida, Penn State, Utah, or Auburn. Okay, so I couldn't make it for Michigan. I couldn't make it for Notre Dame. But I'm not disputing what you're saying. I think on any given day, any team can beat any other team. That's why we play the games. You play to win the game. But with respect to Alabama, and you said it, they lost a distributor, but they lost so much more. And you and I, we all 3 talked about it a couple weeks ago. They didn't play with the same energy as a team that they played with when they had Tua. He was the spark man. He was the spark plug. He made it go. The quarterback there, what he has to do is, as Ott says, the distributor, he just hands it to Najee or pitches it to Najee, to Waddle, to Judy, to Ruggs, to Smith. He just has to make good decisions. But Tua brought just a life to that team, and he overcame a lot of their issues on defense. But I think the committee got it right as we judge teams today. But I think Alabama could handle any of these 4 teams on any given day.
LSU and the tremendous season that they had, and a reminder of the college football playoff national championship game from New Orleans. Will the LSU fans make the short trip from Baton Rouge over? Will they get there Monday, January 13th, 8 Eastern on ESPN? And it's on the ESPN app. LSU has played in the Superdome for national championships before. Sure they have. 2004 Sugar Bowl, Nick Saban calling the shots. Tigers beat Oklahoma to win the BCS title. 4 years later, BCS championship game. LSU, now coached by Les Miles, defeated Ohio State in the Superdome, becoming the last 2-loss team to win it all. And then in 2011, after beating the Tide in the regular season, LSU was shut out in the national title game against Alabama, 21-0. 5 field goals in that game, plus a touchdown run for Trent Richardson. Ach, I mean, what fun would it be in that city that's known for fun to have a team in state playing in that game?
Yeah, every now and then in sports, you get surreal moments. You get surreal players, and I think for LSU, you've gotten a surreal season. I think you've had Joe Burrow come in here and kind of transcend the norm. This hasn't just been a fun football season led by a fun guy. This has truly been a spectacular, meaningful season for a huge program for all of college football. I think that this would just be the perfect storybook ending for LSU and LSU fans.
Yeah, listen, I lived in New Orleans for 5 years, and that is a football crazy town. I mean, they love their Saints, obviously, but they love those Tigers as well. And you will never see a party like a New Orleans party if the LSU Tigers are playing down there. And the boys from the boot playing at home in the national championship, are you kidding me? Be spectacular.
First of all, LSU's never going to lose a party unless they're at Ole Miss, which they might lose that one. But it is going to be a unique setting because that is a place that is really loud, and it's a really tough place to play. We played there, and we played Utah in 2008, and obviously them being the underdog, as soon as things started to get away from us, it became like a road game really quick. And that is something that you're going to have to take into account because LSU's fan base is going to represent. Whether or not it's 50-50, probably not going to happen, not in New Orleans. Secondary market especially, knowing they haven't been there in so long, is going to be huge in favor of the Tigers. So that's something that could be a significant advantage in regards to communication between the opposing team. So I think if LSU can get past Oklahoma, I think we all like the chances of that, then they are well positioned to potentially win the national championship.
Ach, is there any downside, the pressure, family nearby? I mean, is there any sort of a downside to playing in a game so close to home potentially?
You have distractions. Again, everybody has to remember, and those watching at home, you're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids. If you're back home, there are a lot more distractions. It's kind of why you stay at a hotel the night or the nights before the game. Bowl games, keep in mind, you're at a hotel the week before the game, not just the night. So LSU, they're going to do their best to try to remove all distractions. But, yes, you're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids. Honestly, you make sure your stars stay out of trouble.
Yeah, right.
The walk-ons, the kids that don't have as much in the game,
have at it.
Like, hey, y'all have at it. Joe Burrow, I don't want to see you.
The most stressful thing is the ticket requests. I mean, hey, can I get some tickets? I'm gonna need 8. No, hang on. Wait, I can't get you 8.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, this is a big game. This is not exactly easy. You know what? They're thrilled to be having ticket requests in Louisville, Kentucky, because the Cardinals are headed back to a bowl game, and it's a great story. Louisville gets Mississippi State in the Franklin American Mortgage Music City Bowl. That's an enticing matchup. You got the SEC and the ACC battling, the Dogs and the Cardinals, and we're so happy to welcome in Louisville head coach Scott Satterfield here. Hey, Coach, knowing what the kids in your program and your coaches have been through over the past couple of years, how gratifying is it to get back to bowl play?
It's extremely gratifying. I think if you ask most people last spring or summer leading up to the season, do you think Louisville's going bowling? The answer would be no. And so, I think obviously everything's relatively speaking. We had a great year, 5-3 in the ACC, 7 wins, getting back to bowling, and we're very excited about that.
Coach, Greg McElroy, congrats on a remarkable season. You stepped into a position that many people described as toxic, and you won over the players in that locker room so
to try to put a great product on the field, but you have to do that every day, and you have to be consistent. So I commend our staff and everybody in our building, for that matter, providing an environment for our guys that want to come to the building. They want to be over there every single day. They want to come get the work in, and so tremendous buy-in from our players and our staff to have that kind of turnaround, because it wasn't easy, and it's still not. We're still working on it every single day, but just a credit to our staff and our players. I'm extremely excited about where our program is right now compared to a year ago when I first got here about this time. We're pumped about it and looking forward to the future of Cardinal football.
Well, and Coach, along the lines of hard work, we had a chance to chat with Jeremy Pruitt a little bit earlier, and I asked him about what's the identity of Tennessee football. So I'll ask you the same question. What's the identity of Louisville football?
Well, we want to be just a hard-nosed, blue-collar program. We want everything to be earned. We don't want anything given to us. I think, and that comes on a daily basis throughout our competition that we're doing throughout our program, no matter what we're doing, weight room or, workouts or whatever it may be, obviously on the field. But We want it to be that kind of program. And again, we're fighting that. I mean, that wasn't what it was when we first got here. We're trying to get that way. We want to win by running the football and stopping the run and having some big plays through the air. So we've been able to do that. We got to do a lot better job on the defensive side of the ball, and that's what we're going to get better these next 15 practices.
Hey, Coach, look, this is just you and me talking here. No one else is listening to this question. What's up with your quality control coach? I mean, give me the rundown on him.
Well, hey, listen, those guys, that's just some old Appalachian State boys right there. The way we did things up on the mountain was a little bit different. And, you let us off the mountain. Now we got a lot more media spotlight, so these guys get put out there. But you know what that is? That's just guys that are passionate about this game. They have fun with our players. Our players love the passion. They feed off of it, and they're players' coaches. And so, I want them to be who they are. But they get after it, they have a great time, and, that's just the way we run our program.
Coach, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your alma mater, the job that you departed to take the job at Louisville. I know that was a difficult decision for you because Appalachian State is such a special place in your heart and throughout your career. Yep. But what can you say about what that team was able to accomplish this year under Eli Drinkwitz?
Yeah, I'm just really proud of that team. We left that team. They were the third youngest team in the country last year, so we knew a ton of players were coming back, offense and defense. Starting with Zach at quarterback and Darrington Evans at running back. I mean, just some big-time players, and they played great this year. And Coach Drink did a great job with those guys, and super proud of them. 2 Power 5 wins, and 12-1. I think ranked 20th. Man, what a great program and a special place.
Coach, there's some game planning going on for your football team in Mississippi State right now, and Mikael Cunningham came on earlier in the season. Tell me what you've liked of him at the quarterback position, and where are some areas that he needs to improve?
Yeah, Mikael, I think really had a strong year this year. You think about back to August. He gets hurt in practice number 3 of August and missed the next 5 weeks, did not practice. So he missed the Notre Dame game, the first game. Came back in the middle and played a little bit in the EKU game, but then after that, he ended up starting the following week. And I think just week after week, he got better and better, more comfortable what we were doing with the offense. I mean, he ended up throwing 20 touchdowns, 5 picks. So the touchdown, the ratio, the interception ratio was great. He's got some legs. He can run the football. And I just think he's going to continue to get better and better and better. I think for him, his accuracy was much improved this year. I think the way he needs to improve is just continue to understand the offense, where we're trying to go with the football. But he did a great job with that. He also was hindered with an ankle injury this year, but he played through that. So, tough player. So I'm excited about, what he can do and what his future holds. I think he's got a huge upside.
Well, I know he threw a curveball when he changed the name up a little bit on folks, but I know that you're happy